That summer, we rented the yellow cottage by the bend of the river, and I learned to listen to the water as if it kept my secrets. The days wore themselves out like woolen scarves, soft and heavy with heat, and every morning the air tasted of damp earth and lilac, as if the world had just bathed and forgotten to dry itself. The river spoke in a slow, patient voice, a kind of language you learned to translate not with fancy words, but with quiet listening. I was 10. Perhaps 11. All questions and small bravado, and the adults spoke in bursts of stories and chores, while the day itself moved around us like a tide we could neither speed up nor slow down. Our cottage smelled of sunlight and old wood, of smoke and bread cooling on a wire rack, of something sweet and lemony from my mother's dishcloths and her tall glass of lemonade that corrected the sour taste of sand on a hot afternoon. The kitchen window framed the world in a soft, rectangular glow. The kettle sang its tiny iron tune, and somebody's coin of a laugh drifted in from the yard or the harbour beyond the hedge. My father moved with the rhythm of the season, steady and a little stern in the way he kept the line between work and childhood, as if a boundary line drawn in chalk could keep us safe from the larger weather of life. My mother, if you asked me to name the precise sound of her, would be the sound of a kettle of water meeting a cold lip of metal, and then steam lifting away like a small white bird that never quite knew where to go. On a day that sits at the edge of 1,000 afternoons in my memory, I wandered behind the cottage and found dragonflies stitched their wings into the air, skimming the surface with a reckless, bright courage, and I could feel the weight of longing in the breath of the world, the ache and hope of growing, the sense that there was more to life than the long stretch of school and chores and bedtime stories I was just beginning to collect, like coins. It was there, in the shade of a willow that dripped with old rain, that I found him, or perhaps he found me, a tiny sparrow with a bruised wing, trembling on a torn leaf that had fallen from the bank's edge. I don't remember who noticed first, the bird's tremor or my own sudden stillness. The moment stretched out so long that the world seemed to exhale with me. I crouched, and the dirt warmed under my knees. I could smell the river's muddied sweetness, hear a distant bell of a boat bumping against a far-off dock, and see the sparrow's little chest fluttering in my open palm. I learned to cup him carefully, fingers spread like a soft cradle, never squeezing, never patting too hard, listening for the tiny heartbeat that sounded louder than any drum. He trembled, but he did not die there in my hand. Something in him must have trusted that I meant kindness and not harm. I laid him down on the damp leaf again, or perhaps I held him there and let him feel the warmth of my skin through feather and bone, a strange shared heat that belonged to us only for a breath. Then, as if the river itself urged him forward, the sparrow steadied, fluttered, and, with a cautious hop, slipped from my fingers into the safe green shadows of the reeds. The return to the cottage that evening was quiet in a holy kind of way. My sister's laughter drifted in from the yard and mingled with the clink of cups and the heavy scent of the lemon loaf cooling on the sill. My father, who kept count of hours like a fisherman counts tides, looked at me with a small, almost shy smile that I did not quite know how to read. My mother pressed sugar into peach slices and told a story about a girl who would not take a thing for granted, even when the world was too loud to listen. I nodded at stories I did not fully understand, and yet I understood enough to feel that something sacred had passed between the sparrow's fragile trust and the child who held him. That night I lay on the edge of a single bed under a quilt made from 6 generations of Sunday afternoons, and the ceiling seemed to tilt and press in, though not with fear, but with the sense that the world had widened a little in my stead. The memory did not come to me as a single thunderclap, but as a patient rain, one drop, then another, until the air grew hazy with it, and the room took on a softer shape. I could taste the tang of lemon in the air from the living room, feel the rough cotton of the quilt against my cheek, hear the distant creak of the cottage as the night settled into itself. And through it all, the sparrow's small rescue still glimmered there, an emblem of something tender and true, a first lesson in mercy, offered not as a grand gesture, but as an ordinary, constant token of care. That memory stayed with me, a quiet compass for the years that followed. It did not shout its wisdom in the way of reward or reward schooling. It whispered, instead, that life's deepest work is often invisible, patient and local. The careful, unshowy business of lifting a creature up, or softer still, listening long enough to hear the needs of another, even if those needs are only the quiet, fluttering needs of a wing in need of rest. It taught me to pause before I act, to consider the weight of my hand, to choose gentleness as a kind of daily practice rather than a dramatic virtue. As the seasons moved on and I became a man, and then older again, that day by the lagoon kept returning, a lighthouse inside me. The river's rhythm became a metronome for my days, the way a heartbeat can tempo a life if you give it space. I learned to carry the memory like a small, living thing tucked in the pocket of my heart, to pull it out when time grew loud with worry or pride or fear. I saw in the mirrored glass of old age how easy it is to forget the things that did not seem like much at the time. The way the sun found the silver thread in my sister's hair, the way the kettle sang when the water came to boil, the way the sparrow's rescue could have happened to anyone, yet happened to me, and changed the scale of my small world. There were moments in adulthood when I watched someone who needed help and realized I had learned nothing too late. Or when I spoke a sentence that cut rather than comfort. Or when I forgot to breathe in the face of a cold, busy day. But there too, in the memory's harbour, was that same soft truth. Break through the noise with gentleness. Cultivate patience. Give your presence before you give your advice. The sparrow did not beg. It did not demand mercy. It simply trusted that a person's hands could be gentle enough to hold and ease, could be patient enough to wait for healing to begin. I learned to translate that into the wider language of life, in a conversation, in a letter, in the small kindnesses that hold families together, the hot kettle and the cooling loaf, the door held open for someone who is tired, the quiet listening given to a child who needs to tell a story that does not yet have an ending. Now, in the slow reading years, I can feel the river's memory in my bones, the way it once moved me to leave space for a fragile thing to be repaired, to give a creature a chance to live again, to trust that the world can be good even when it is not easy to see. I am careful to walk with others as if they are plans and futures I wish to keep intact, to treat strangers with a tenderness that might seem unnecessary in a world that prizes speed and certainty. I have learned, in 100 small gestures, to choose mercy over judgment, to offer a seat, to offer a story, to offer a quiet ear, to offer the kind of presence that does not demand to be remembered, but that inevitably is when a life is looked at with the patience of time. Time will go on, and the river will keep moving in its own stubborn, patient way, a line of silver threading through the trees. Yet the memory of that summer remains a bright hinge in my heart, A moment when a child learned not to own the world so completely, but to borrow light from it, to see another creature, be it sparrow or human, through gentleness, to offer a simple mercy and call it a beginning rather than a finish. In those quiet hours, I learned that meaning is not a fireworks show, but a steady, ember-like glow that travels through a lifetime, warming what it touches and making it possible to endure with grace. And so I am grateful for the river's patient current, for the humble rescue of a small wing, for the day I learned to place a hand upon life with care rather than with haste. If time has a way of erasing grandeur, it cannot erase the tenderness of a moment kept alive by memory. The world keeps turning, and I keep listening, and in listening I find the truth that has never vanished, that to care for one fragile thing is to learn to care for all of us, and that the heart's capacity to remember is a quiet, enduring gift. For that I am grateful, and for the life that memory has helped me become, the patient, hopeful, imperfect keeper of small mercies. That is enough to carry me with a soft and grateful heart through whatever days remain.